So welcome to the next in the Quinnipiac University series on cybersecurity. And this month, this coming month, October, is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we're going to have special interviews of thought leaders in the cybersecurity field, one per week, that are going to talk about what should the average citizen, what should the average small business do, what can sort of the rest of us do to protect our information. And today I'm very happy to have actually as our first guest in this series, Roger Grimes. Roger is a longtime security expert. He is currently a security evangelist at Nova4, which is the leading company on cybersecurity awareness training. He has also been a security architect at Microsoft for many years. He's been a columnist at InfoWorld. He's written multiple books. I'm happy to illustrate one of them here, Data-Driven Computer Defense. And he's also working on another book, which we'll talk about at the end. But for now, I want to have a conversation and get Roger's thoughts on what can the average person do? So it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and the Department of Homeland Security is talking about personal accountability. It's talking about being proactive. And there's this huge amount of noise that comes into everybody of what, you know, all of us, what we need to, what's going on in breaches, what we need, how do you distill all this and come up with some specific action items that folks should do? What thoughts do you have on that, Roger?
Well, I tell you, I love talking about this topic because I think there's only a handful of things you need to do. I mean, we're told we need to do a million things. There were 16,555 vulnerabilities alone last year. Every type of hacker in the world is trying to break into our systems, you know, nation state hackers, financial thieves, script kiddies. The reality is really three things has most of the bang of the home user, but any user. The first one is that to recognize that 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches happen because of social engineering. So it's getting that email or going to a website. So it's an email that tries to trick you into either installing a Trojan horse program or into revealing your credentials. Or it could be you go to a website and it says, hey, you need to install this information or you need to log in. Or it could be these days, it's happened a lot more on the SMS messaging on cell phones. It's happening phone calls to your cell phone. Like they'll say, hey, we're with Microsoft and you know, we've detected a virus on your system and we'd like to help you. And I laugh because, you know, I worked at Microsoft for 11, 12 years as a full-time employee and a couple of years before that. And not only do they not proactively ever call you ever, if you could find the right number on the internet to call and you had a credit card and $200 ready to go, I challenge you to get help when you actually need it. I mean, but if you don't know, you don't know. And I guess that's where it comes over that security awareness training is the idea that, you know, if you're not aware of things, like if you don't know that if you go to Craigslist and you go to sell your car or whatever it happens to be, the first person that's going to respond to you is probably going to be a scammer, you know, where they're like, hey, we're going to pay. Well, I'll pay you full price, plus I'll pay shipping. And all you have to do is trust my escrow agent, or we're going to send you a check. And the check's going to be for more than the amount that you're asking for. You cashed at your bank, you keep most of it and just send this $1,000 to me. You know, that's the whole thing of that. If you've not heard about it, you don't, you know, you can easily be tricked. So I'd say number one is just be skeptical. Anytime someone's asking you to do something, to give something, you just have to have this healthy level of skepticism. That's number one. And then number two, make sure to patch your software. I mean, and if you do those two things, and when you patch it, it has to be legitimate patching mechanisms, meaning, you know, if you go to a website and it's like, oh, you need to install Adobe Acrobat. Well, don't trust that. You know, get out of that website, go to adobe.com, or, you know, you shouldn't ever patch anything anytime you're in an internet browser. That's almost always bad. But if I look, I'm a data-driven defense evangelist, and when I look at the data for the last 30 years, almost all of the attacks, not all, but like 99% of all successful attacks are related to people being tricked into doing something they shouldn't or having unpatched software. For those two things, you're significantly protected. And the third thing I'll add real quick before I let you get a word in is that make sure you don't use the same passwords across multiple websites. Use a different password for every website. Those websites get broken into and compromised all the time. And a lot of times you don't know that it's occurred. So you don't want to give the attacker, I think that the statistic is that the average person uses the same 6 or 7 passwords across 100 websites. You don't want to be that person, and maybe you need to use what's called a password manager program. There's a lot of free ones out there like LastPass. I use one called 1Password, but there's a lot of really good ones out there. And they help you to create long and complex passwords that are unique across every website that you have. And it will enter the passwords for you. So like I can't be fished out of my passwords because I don't even know my passwords.
Very good. Well, let me follow up with a couple more questions on that. So I know social engineering you mentioned, that was the number one thing you mentioned. So why is it that this has been talked about a lot? What are the sort of Achilles heels that come along? Because you'd think, well, we've talked about social engineering, nobody's going to click on links anymore. What are the scenarios that people have to be concerned about? Why do people go down this path? Are there any set of reasons or more? What things should we look out for? Links from people you don't, somehow people keep doing this, I guess is my comment. So is there any more intelligence that we have or data that we have as to why they do that and what other things they should, people can do to protect themselves?
Well, they do it like the guy said, why do they rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Social engineering, the reason why it's done is it really works and works well. Like I kind of laugh when people will come up with these new, I remember this, I'm probably dating myself because it's probably 10 or 15 years ago, but this brilliant woman, this thing she called the red-blue pill attack, where the attack would create this hypervisor. It would be an operating system inside of an operating system. So the malware program literally would have a copy of your operating system and it would virtualize it. And that's how it would compromise you. And it worked. But I laughed because I was like, they don't need to do that. The stuff they're doing with, a couple thousand lines of code are working quite well. What's nice about social engineering is it works across all operating systems, all browsers. It bypasses all your defenses. They don't care if you've got antivirus or a firewall. A firewall and antivirus is not going to stop you from giving away your password to a fake site. So they do it because it works, and they slightly change it. There's stressor events, right? Like, hey, you need to respond to this. We're going to lock you out of your account, or somebody's broken into your account. That's a really common stressor. Like, oh, we're from Microsoft, and it looks like somebody from Nigeria is trying to break into your account. The average person has heard Nigeria does a lot of scams, so they panic. And maybe that other things. Learn how to read those URLs, those universal resource locators, those HTTPSs. Most browsers will highlight the actual domain name, let's say like Microsoft.com or Noble4.com. They'll highlight it, bold it versus the rest of it. And you always want to make sure that the place you think you're going really is that place. If it's an email that claims to come from Google or Gmail, that it actually says Google or Gmail in the domain. Or if it says it's from Microsoft, it says it's from Microsoft in the domain. And what the hackers will create these URLs that have the word Microsoft or Google or Gmail or whoever in it, but it isn't really the true part of the domain. So another part is learn how to read those URLs so that when you hover over them, that you can say, oh, does that look like a good one? You're like, that's a little bit long. It's got the word Microsoft in it. It's not Microsoft.com. So, I'm not clicking.
Good. So I think that's one specific thing. Make sure you know how to read the URLs and take the time to sort of decipher what's in them before you start clicking on them. So that, and then the second thing you mentioned was patch software. So what can the average user do about that? I know I believe Windows 10 has automated patching. Your smartphone to some extent, depending on the effectiveness of the vendors, right? They're patching this software on a regular basis. What does you mentioned Adobe, what should an average user do, if anything, to, buy current operating systems, right? You need to keep your operating system reasonably up to date. Are there other things that the typical small business or home user should be doing in the patch software area?
Yeah, so first, number one is stay patched. When a patch comes out, apply it. Maybe wait a day or 2 or 3 because sometimes there can be bugs. But after that, apply it. But make sure you're applying the right patch. Most things, will self-patch, not everything, like your wireless router at home. You literally, most of the time, have to go into that wireless router, connect to some admin part of it and go, oh, check to see if there's a software update. Oh, there is? Apply.
Yeah.
They do it automatically. You're right about the cell phones. They only get patched about once a quarter or once or twice a year. But the majority of the risk is actually to the browser and to what's called the browser add-ins. Those are those little programs like Adobe Acrobat or Flash or Java. Those are the most compromised ones. So you always want to update them and make sure they're updated by, again, the legitimate means. Meaning, again, if you're in your browser when you're told to update it, it's not a good place. That's where a lot of mischievousness can go on. But probably the most common one is just stop ignoring the updates. Like a lot of people I will go to will go, Roger, what's a patch? What's an update? And I go, that little icon that tells you that you need to run this updating routine for your thing and it's been bugging you for 8 months? You need to do it.
Okay, that's a very good point. I'm one of those people. Yeah, whenever there's a pop-up that says you need to update software, you got to stop doing what you're doing, right? And take the time to do the update and restart if necessary. That's okay. So that's very good. The last thing you mentioned was password managers, which I'm a big believer in. But in your book, which I have right here, Data-Driven Computer Defense, you talked about focusing your defense depending on the types of attacks. I was wondering what are your thoughts around sort of what are the current or coming threats, let's say, for individual users or small business owners? What kinds of things keep you up at night in terms of, attack vectors that we should be worried about, or maybe there's nothing to worry about? So.
Yeah, lots to worry about, although it really hasn't changed in 3 decades. It's either unpatched software or social engineering, and it's been that way for decades. I mean, since the advent of computers, really, not too many years later, they were starting to get Trojans and worms and social engineering. So really, the things change. Like these days, ransomware, right? That is certainly a big concern where you get this Trojan horse program that gets in your system, encrypts your data, your whole network, and then wants a Bitcoin ransom to free it. But that's not really your problem. The problem is, how did it get into your system? And it's almost always unpatched software and social engineering. It could be misconfiguration or user error. That does happen. Or like, what was it a couple of weeks ago? A couple of weeks ago now, it was Capital One had a misconfigured firewall. Yeah. And Amazon Insider used that. So you do get those outlier attacks, but for the home user especially, it's almost always unpatched software, social engineering, and then you need to worry about closing those things down. Or you want to, if you're worried about ransomware, you're worried about the wrong thing. You want to be worried about how ransomware can get in. I say worrying about ransomware is like worrying about the brakes of your car after your car has been stolen. It's just, if it's not ransomware, it could be a keylogger, or it could be some type of what's called the pass the hash attack. I mean, there's a million things they can do if you're not putting down social engineering and patching your software. You need to really concentrate on the root causes, because if you don't do that, you'll never stop it. Like if you have a house and someone's breaking into your house, as a matter of fact, I think I have this in the book, but maybe someone's breaking into your house, and every time they break into your house, they're breaking in through a window or unlocked window. Well, you don't want to put more locks on your door for it to be the issue, right? To fix the issue, you've got to put put locks on the window or have stronger windows. That's the same thing in the computer world. Is, man, there's so many things they tell us to be worried about. Like literally, I call it bubbles in a glass of champagne. They're just, we're overwhelmed. I think on an average day, there are 15 new exploits, 15 to 43 new exploits announced every day, day after day, year after year. Well, instead of worrying about that, try to focus on stopping social engineering and patching your software, and you're going to stop those things, all of those things. And it's the hackers, I guess that's even, I've been doing this 32 years. And one of the surprising things since 1987, one of the things that surprised me the most is that how they break in, those two things hasn't really changed. It's so successful. And for some reason, we're just still not doing a great job of mitigating and stopping those things. They make slight adjustments. Their spam emails change a little bit. Maybe they're doing an IRS scam today. They're doing a Microsoft scam. Maybe they're doing a Google scam. Whatever the popular thing is. And it seems to work. But if you start to go, hey, I'm going to patch my stuff, I'm going to do a better job of training myself, my family, and my organization to be more skeptical about things. You put down everything. If you fix those two things, you put down nearly everything.
That's very good advice, because it takes the whole, all the news headlines about all new attack methods and everybody's worried about that. It boils it down into two sort of defenses that are going to stop most of those. And then you also mentioned the password manager. So that's actually, I think, extremely good, simple advice that everybody can follow. So thank you so much for that. Now, before I let you go, I know you have a new book coming out, which isn't exactly security awareness training, but I know our students and others listening might also be interested in that. Can you tell us a little bit about that, your next security book?
Yeah, sure. So my 11th book, and I'm super excited. It's literally coming out. I think it gets released November 1st or something like that officially, but it's for sale on Amazon, called Cryptography Apocalypse. And it's about quantum computers. And quantum computers, Einstein and other people figured out quantum mechanics back in the 1920s and 1930s. And then in the 1950s, 60s, they figured out, hey, if we can actually get computers that use these quantum mechanic properties, and they're strange and weird when you read about them for the first time or the 100th time, but if we get those, we can do some pretty wonderful things. And there's this day called quantum supremacy, which is the day when quantum computers, and we invented the first quantum computer came in 1998, and ever since then there's been a race to see who can get here. But the term's called quantum supremacy, and that's the day when a quantum computer can do something that a traditional classical binary computer can't do. And we're really, really close to that. As a matter of fact, last week, Google released a research paper that seemed to indicate they did one form of quantum supremacy. It wasn't something that could be used to take over the world or anything, but they had this example where they created a lot of random numbers that were truly and certifiably random. But they did it's kind of a landmark. They actually published the paper, retracted it, but now a lot of people have gotten to see the paper. It does seem as if they've done it. They do seem to be the first person in a very limited way to do quantum supremacy. So it's a pretty big deal in the computer world, because it means the first time ever you've got quantum computers that are getting ready to do something that classical computers can't do. But even more importantly, is the next step is what's called the quantum crypto break. And it's that these quantum computers, anywhere from a couple of years from now, or maybe in a maximum of 10 years, I personally think it's either been done already or it's just a couple of years out, is that they'll be able to break the modern forms, a lot of the modern forms of cryptography we have today, like HTTPS that protects most of the internet, most of the Wi-Fi protection, smart card protections, the new FIDO multi-factor authentication devices that everybody's in love with, they get broken too. It even has the protection of what's called symmetric encryption. So AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, the protection is halved, cut in half. The SHA-2 hashing algorithms, their protection gets halved. So that's going to be a pretty remarkable day. The US government and people around the world are working to both simultaneously, they want to be the person that creates a quantum computer that breaks all the encryption, and they're also creating new forms of quantum resistant cryptography that we can all put in place to help prevent ourselves from being hacked. The question is when do those quantum computers get powerful enough to break the modern day crypto? And will you and I and everyone else be prepared with that new quantum resistant cryptography? Or is it's kind of like a Y2K, race? If you remember the Y2K, oh my God, January 1st, 2000 is coming, we got to be prepared. And a lot of people say, well, that was people got overhyped. No. We prepared for years for that event, and we were able to identify and repair most of the devices. So there were, they had movies that showed planes falling out of the sky and earthquakes. It was one of the worst disaster movies of all time. But there wasn't truth that there were going to be a lot of computer problems, but we figured out ahead of time and we addressed it. The problem with the quantum crypto is that you could have bad guys or nation states sniffing your encrypted traffic today and then waiting until they have the capability of cracking it, and then 3 or 5 years later, looking into your most intimate secrets, right? So you could be at risk now, even though it's possibly 3 or 5 or 10 years off. How many secrets in your life or your company do you need protected past a couple of years or up to 10 years or past 10 years? Because there's a chance that somebody could be sniffing it and breaking it, even though they don't have the capability today.
So Roger, what was the name of the book again, and when will people be able to find it on Amazon next month or?
It's already on Amazon. It's called Cryptography Apocalypse.
Okay, wonderful.
It's been available for a couple of weeks, and it's going to be released, I think, November 1st. So a month from now or something like that. But it's
outstanding.
So
outstanding. Well, thank you very much for talking to us. I think you've got a lot. You've given us 2 or 3 really good action items that people can undertake to protect themselves. And thank you all for listening, and join us again next week when we'll talk to another thought leader about cybersecurity awareness.
thanks, everyone.